That's chapter 5, 1 through 24. Okay?
After these things, there was the feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porticos. In these lay a multitude of those who were sick, blind, lame, withered, waiting for the moving of the waters. For an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons into the pool and stirred up the water. Whoever then first, after the stirring up of the water, stepped in, was made well from whatever disease which he was afflicted. And a certain man was there who had been 38 years in his sickness. When Jesus saw him lying there, and he knew that he had already been there a long time in that condition, he said to him, "Do you wish to get well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no man to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another one steps before me." Jesus said to him, "Arise, take up your pallet and walk." And immediately the man became well, took up his pallet, and began to walk. Now it was the Sabbath on that day. Therefore the Jews were saying to him, who was cured, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not permissible for you to carry your pallet." But he answered them, "He who made me well was the one who said to me, 'Take up your pallet and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Take up your pallet and walk'?" But he who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had slipped away while there was a crowd in that place. Afterward Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "Behold, you have become well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse may befall you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. And for this reason the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But he answered them, "My Father is working until now, and I myself am working."
Okay. 18.
Because, therefore, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because he not only was breaking the Sabbath, but also was calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. Jesus therefore answered and was saying to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself, unless it is something he sees the Father do. For whatever the Father does, these things the Son also does in like manner. For the Father loves the Son, and shows him all things that he himself is doing. And greater works than these will he show them, that you may marvel. For just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, even so the Son also gives life to whom he wishes. For not even the Father judges anyone, but he hath given all judgment to the Son, in order that all may honor the Son, even as they honor his Father. He who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life, and does not come into judgment, but has passed out of death into life."
Say, Father, we just thank you for your word, and just pray that to each one of us in Jesus' name. Okay, so we're going to be talking about how Jesus' ministry and how it works and what he's doing. Now, we're going to look at both sides of the question of signs and wonders, okay, because there's 2 sides to this issue. Well, the third side, it would be that they're not signs and wonders, they're all false, but nobody in here holds that, so we'll just deal with the other 2, which is when Jesus does a sign, what's the purpose of the sign, why does he do it, and what's the end result, okay? And I went through this, the Sunday night group, they also wanted to talk about this, so they were studying 1 Corinthians. We'll probably go from 1 Corinthians into 2 Corinthians. And then I have that out there. There's 2 other books to Corinthians. So if you find one, let me know, and I'll see what we can get for it. Okay. So in the early part of his ministry, he's reacting to people who he's drawing into his inner circle, okay? And the signs and wonders, the miracles, are around the people that he's close to, like the wedding at Canaan, and different people. Samaritan woman, he's not close to her, but she is the door that opening the door into the Samaritan people. And because of that miracle, there were a lot of people that followed him from the Samaritan group of people. We talked about her and her interaction with the people. And now, Jesus says and I've tried to explain to you, in all the time, Jesus is in control of what he does. But even though he specifically targets certain people, like he told the disciples, you have not chosen me, I have chosen you, and ordained you that you'd go forth and bear fruit. Now, that is true in the inner circle in that. And he's even picking out people necessarily. He continues to do signs and wonders, but sometimes it's not easy to see what's happening. Now, when I went through this time. I was born and raised in church, and we just found out recently, because my son's into this stuff, that our great-grandfather married William Brewster's, one of his offspring, okay? So my family goes back to the Pilgrims, okay? And I don't know any non-Christians in my family, as far as I can remember. And, Nancy knows a lot farther than I do, because she knows the older cousin. My cousins were just interested in racing up and down the mountain, shooting stuff. So that's what we did, instead of passing stories around. But I don't remember being a non-Christian. I don't have any memory of that. I don't have a memory of anybody in my family, any family context where we were moving from non-Christian to Christian. As far as I know, my whole family, all my cousins, all my greats and greats and greats, as far as I have any knowledge of, they're all Christians. So, and then my son come up and said, the first Davis to come across from Wales married a great William Brewster, who was the pastor in Plymouth. So her name was Elizabeth Greer, and she was the granddaughter of Jonathan Brewster, who had left Plymouth and gone up into Connecticut. Now, I just say all that because, in my teenage years, I really struggled not with believing whether there's a God, because like I said, I have no time in my life where I didn't believe in God and Jesus, and that the Bible was true. Although, if you ask me specific questions, I wouldn't have been able to answer them. But when I turned 17, I went to Chicago, got my life challenged. I came back and I joined the Jesus People movement. And the reason I did that was because, I started to learn that being a Christian is more than just going to church or getting baptized. But the Jesus People here was very strongly Pentecostal, charismatic. Charismatic, Pentecostal, those two terms kind of collide sometimes. But and I've seen lots of signs and wonders. And so much so that I've had people contact me that have been writing books about it, about signs and wonders in South Idaho or Magic Valley, or signs and wonders in the Northwest, whatever. And they've contacted me. I've always put the gospel ahead of that, So I've never shared those stories. The only place I share that is here. And because they belong to you as part of this church. and we've seen all kinds of things. But my question has always been, what is the purpose of signs and wonders, and what do they actually accomplish? And you'd be surprised, you'd be very surprised at the way Jesus handles them. And one thing, let's just put this aside because let's take this and there's real popular in America what they call cessationists. Now, cessationists are pastors who believe that signs and wonders have ceased. So they've seceded. And that the whole purpose of signs and wonders is to glorify the Lord and verify the Bible, okay? Now, and God doesn't do signs and wonders ever, since the Bible's been written. Let me just say this. Psalm 115 says, our God is in heaven. He does whatever he wants. If you start saying, because what you're saying by cessationists is you're saying God can't do these outside of the parameters of my own understanding. Now, but you would also have to believe that God doesn't have the power or the will to do whatever he pleases. And that's a position I'm not going to accept. So cessationist is out as far as I'm concerned, beside the fact that I've already seen signs and wonders. And so what happens is you start to play word games. This is not a miracle. It's just a thing that happens in the church today. It's really the power of positive thinking or whatever. That's hard to do when you have a young man declared dead on a railroad track and arrives at the hospital DOA, and 2-3 hours later, they unplug him to let him go. And I was on the internet with him last night, passing notes back and forth. So I know what happened. After 3 hours of being declared dead, he came back to life. Now, I've talked to him at length about it. He doesn't have any memory. If you have to, stories. But in a situation like that where there's a lot of damage, they're going to give him drugs to control his brain. And the effect is that he will not remember anything during that time. If he is conscious, and there's no physical indication that he's conscious, they give drugs so that the brain is not conscious. For some reason, they believe it helps in healing in some cases. Now, I know a doctor who has a card in his wallet that says, "Do not use those drugs on me." And he's not a believer, and he doesn't want to go through that without his conscience available to him. And that's his own reason. What his reasons are for doing that, I don't know, but I can imagine myself. Now, so I'm just saying that right up front because there's another side to signs and wonders that you guys need to be aware of. And some of you have been around enough to where you know that. Let's look at this man. First of all, this is not the same man at the pool of Siloam, okay? This man is sick. He has asthenia. He is ill. He's not just paralyzed, but he has a disease, some kind of sickness. Now, he's not at the pool of Siloam. He's at the pool of Bethesda. Siloam is in the very bottom, the southern part of the temple area. And this is at the very northeastern part above the temple area. And so he's going through that. So it's two different people and two different reasons. It looks like it's the same story. They still have the account of going into, being able to get into the pool while the pool is being stirred by angels. And I'll tell you, there's some technical problems with that because that particular statement is in both accounts, but it is also an addition to the account, a technical addition to the account. I did not, although I have the ability to analyze those kinds of things. It takes time, and it isn't relative to us at this point. Whether there really is an angel that stirs, I have no idea. The passage, like I said, is added. But I've explained this before. When a passage is added and it seems to float around the Bible, does not mean it's false. They call them floating pericopes, or little stories, little sayings. The woman caught in adultery is a floating story. It's all over the New Testament, okay? The Gospels, anyway, the Gospels. It floats around the Gospels, and it ended up in the King James Bible in John chapter 8. And so that's where it is in all the modern Bibles. But it floats all over the place. Now the question comes, is it a true teaching or saying of Jesus? Look, Paul has floating pericopes of Jesus in his writings that aren't in the Gospels. And Jesus said this. Paul make one line statement. And the question is, where did he get it? Well, he lived with the apostles. He traveled with them. It didn't come from a revelation, from an angel or something like that. He just knows that it's a very common statement, and that all the Christians in Jerusalem at that time hold to it, but none of the writers of the Gospels used that statement, but Paul uses it. And floating statements can be, are around in the Bible. Now, and that, whether they're true or not, has a whole bunch of different questions around it. Some of them can be, like the woman caught in adultery is very old, goes way back to the time of the Gospels. It just doesn't go in John. It could be anywhere. But I'm not going to get into that anymore, other than saying that. It really isn't relative to our understanding of this. He's been ill for 38 years, and when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been a long time in that condition, he said to him, "Do you wish to get well?" Now, that's a very interesting thing. Why would he be at the pool if he didn't wish to get well? He's wanting to get into the pool so he can get healed. Now, he's been there for 38 years, but it's a very interesting statement, because I know those people that work in health scientists, that's a very important question. Do you want to be well? Because a lot of times people don't. And there's a question here. There's a question here. Is this literally, does he really want to be well? But notice he doesn't ask, do you believe you can be? Do you believe I can heal you? It's nothing about faith. In fact, you're going to come to realize it. The faith question doesn't arise in this context at any time. Okay? Jesus saw him lying, and he said to him, "Do you wish to get well?" The sick man answered, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool whenever the water stirred, but while I'm coming, another steps down before me." Now, that too is a fascinating response. He has a reason. He's hopeless. He didn't have any hope. He doesn't honestly believe that it will ever happen. So, well, why does he stay at the pool? Because there's a sliver, there's a tiny little sliver that maybe someday everybody else will get healed, or I don't know what he's thinking, why he's still there. But you have to understand, people can be in a position of sickness with no reason to be there, other than that they're without hope. Isn't that true? They don't have to have a reason to being sick. And I really thought through this. I was thinking through this. he says in verse 3, in these lay a multitude. How many is that? 2, 3, 5, 8, 10? No. That's not a multitude. There's thousands of people here, and they're all sick. You've got two pools here, not very big, and there's a porch built around the pools. Somebody was kind to these people to keep them out of the sun a little bit, give them a little bit of comfort. But you know, this pool, these two pools have to have a network, a social network of people that care for sick people. You ever been in a place where it has 1,000 sick people? You ever been in a place where there's a few sick people? You know? I can't even imagine the logistics of having two pools like this. They're oftentimes, in some of the translations, they're called springs, which gives me a little hope. You know, they're flowing, which means there's water leaving the area. Now, the Temple Mount is high. You know, it sits over the Kidron Valley. So these springs are gradual. They probably don't run very strong, but they're filling and flowing out of the area, which is probably one reason why the sick people are there, because you have a certain amount of transfer of material that needs to move on, you know, and because sick people have to live just like normal people do. They have to eat, they have to do everything that normal people do. But they're not moving, they're not going anywhere, they're just there. And there's a multitude of them. And Jesus walks in, doesn't heal anybody but this guy. He picks him out. Now, is he picking him out because of his faith? Like I said, there's no sign of that. No evidence at all that he or anybody around him has faith. Like I said, Jesus is moving away from that. He's moving into an area where he does signs and wonders just to glorify the Lord, just to glorify and to lead further into his ministry. And he talks about that. He starts this when he fed, when they come and they said, "Are you hungry?" He said, "No, I've eaten of food that you don't understand yet. And my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work." And he's going to further that statement in this passage. So Jesus asked them, "Do you wish to get well?" And you know, I think even in our day and age, the question of do people want to be well is a big question, because there's whole cultures, there's whole social networks of people who are sick, and the networks exist because the people who are sick exist. I'm certain there's a network of people around these pools to take care of the sick people. Maybe they're families, maybe they're temple workers, maybe they're a group of priests that are, have compassion on these people. I don't know. But they exist. I guarantee it. These people exist. And he comes, he doesn't have anybody particularly concerned for him, And so, because he says there's no one to take me into the water and Jesus saw him lying there. He knew he had already been a long time. And then he said, "Sir, I have no man to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I am coming, another steps down before me." Now, notice he has an answer. You notice that people who are sick, they don't think about being well. They think about being sick. And he does too. He's got an answer why he's sick. He's not sick, as you're going to see later, Jesus says, don't continue sinning so that you will be sick again. So You know, sin sometimes has something to do with sickness. You'll see this in 1 John where he says, him who is sick, call the elders, and that his sins might be forgiven. I'm not saying all sickness, I don't believe that. All sickness has something to do with, well, I do believe that, because all sickness goes back to Adam's sin. Okay? So, but sometimes we sin in a time where it brings us into a position. And we've been up at camp, and even after camp, you know, the young people have been looking at Romans 1 and the context there, and just trying to think through that, because in our culture right now, our culture is promoting illness. It's promoting disease. Our science, our medical community promotes it because they get money from it. Okay? That's understood. I mean, I'm not passing gossip or anything. Or why would they be doing trances on kids? You know? That makes them sick. People that go through trance have to be on medication their whole life, because they're not designed to transfer. And they can't, literally. And so when they start the process of trancing, they have to be medically treated the rest of their life because they've screwed up their body. Okay? Now, so, you know, disease can be related to sin. And we don't know what he did, if anything. I don't know. But Jesus seems to imply that. He doesn't say it outright, but he does imply it. But you notice, he says, I have no one to put me in the pool. How can he get well? Well, he doesn't have anybody concerned about him. And so he's hopeless. He doesn't see any way out of this situation. And he has all of his answers ready. Okay? And sometimes we get into that, don't we? When we're you know, our situation is we have a problem, and we have figured out that this is the reason why we have the problem, and there's no one that can help us. You know, I've been watching what they call on the spectrum. You know what that means, on the spectrum? It means that you've been diagnosed with a condition whereby you cannot be successful in something, whether it's education, whether it's whatever, sports. You're on the spectrum. And I got my first diagnosis here just this year. And I am on the spectrum. Of course, you guys already knew that. But I refuse to use that. I mean, did it shock me and surprise me? Of course not. I mean, I know myself better than most people do. You know? That is, know me. I know myself better than most people know me. But people who know me are not shocked at all that I'm on the spectrum. All my grandkids, most of them are on the spectrum too. The question comes, once you get the diagnosis, once you're on the spectrum that you can't be successful because you have this problem, that problem, this problem, that problem, then you have to struggle with that and fight with it, otherwise you become hopeless. You know, and years ago I've read biographies of men. You know, some of my favorite men, like Francis Schaeffer, he was definitely on the spectrum. He's got 21 books to his credit. You know how many he wrote? 21 books to his credit. No, he wrote 3. Because other people wrote for him. He's not a writer. It's very difficult. He's on the spectrum. He can think and he can teach, but he just can't write. And so I knew that, I've known that my whole life, that he was like that. Churchill also was on the spectrum. He could not write. He never stood still. Churchill never did. He didn't have chairs in his library, his office where he wrote. he had stools. He had stools up against the window, and the windows were higher, and his desk just came off the window sill, and then he would have a stool there. He could choose to sit on the stool or just write walking, but he would walk around the room, come by the desk and write something else, and then walk around the room. That's how Churchill wrote, because he just never settled down. He could never sit still. And, the thing is, our statement a lot of times our statement in our society is, well, you need to give him drugs so he'll quit doing that. But then he probably will quit writing as well. Yeah. So, the question is, when and if you read the literature on Ritalin, little boys that do that, people, their parents, and their teachers and everybody put them on drugs to stop them from doing that. That makes the teacher happy, it makes their grades go up, which makes the parents happy, but the child doesn't succeed because he doesn't need drugs. And the little boy that walks around the room constantly maybe he doesn't need to be stopped. Maybe he needs to be let to walk around the room. And Diane spoke on this in Indonesia, where everyone on the spectrum is warehoused in Muslim countries because they're fatalists. Islam is a fatalist religion. It's God's will, and the core thinking in Islam is to submit to Allah's will, no matter what it is. And so what do? When children are on the spectrum, they put them in a warehouse. And it can be something as simple as they only have one arm, or they're missing a toe, I don't know. Or they can't see. There's a lot of blind people that are brilliant. But they warehouse them all of them. And Dr. Davis went with me to Indonesia because I was preaching in Indonesia all over. I was with Stephanie, and we went to visit with her, and I got to preach everywhere. But as soon as they found out that my wife, who was just going along for the ride, as a doctor in education, her schedule filled up, just packed, just boom, 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 boom. And she was speaking, 3-4 times a week. And remember, she spoke to an education school. It was a math school. This college, all it does is math. And there were 300 math teachers in the room with her. And she talked about children on the spectrum, their warehouse kids. And there's a number of women in there that begin to bawl, begin to weep and cry. Why do you think?
Their kids were on the spectrum?
They were warehoused, yes. They had kids in warehouses. And she told the story of our son, who is the most severe as far as the spectrum goes, has this most severe diagnosis, whatever. And he's a college professor of math, and that's what they are studying is math. And he has bachelor's degrees, he has several bachelor's degrees and several master's degrees. Would have had a doctorate, but because he's conservative, that didn't fly in this culture, okay? It was denied his doctorate because of, and we talked about this last week. Gina explained it to us. So here's this guy's attitude. I don't have someone that cares enough to put me in the water. Now, that's as far as we can go with it. But we have in our culture, we have both, we have the problem. When you look at a situation like this where people are not moving away from the pool, they're just there, and they have this society around them taking care of them. Then you have the I can't because, and then you have, well, he can't, he's on the spectrum. He's this, he's that. And we come in and take care of it. And that's what our job is. And so So you have that, and I think we need to realize that that's behind the picture. I mean, that's behind this story. It's suggested there. The multitude of people who are sick are there, a multitude. And this man can't get well because he has the reasons labeled here, okay? And Jesus doesn't say, do you believe? He doesn't question him. He doesn't say, do you believe I can heal you? Doesn't, like he did with the other man. He just said, get up, pick up your pallet, and walk. Very interesting, very compassionate, right? Get up and take your pallet. Very direct, very straightforward. And immediately the man became well and picked up his pallet and began to walk. Now it was the Sabbath day.
You always did that on the Sabbath.
Yeah, for a reason. Yeah. So the Jews were saying to the man who was cured, it is the Sabbath. It is not permissible for you to carry your pallet. Now he got in trouble, and he didn't expect that. He wanted a reward. He wanted to be recognized. He doesn't. He gets put down. It's not permissible for you to carry your pallet, even though you just got healed. And they knew it. He'd been there 38 years. Listen, you go back to Nicodemus. Nicodemus was the teacher of Israel. And what did he say? We know you're a man from God. Who's the we?
The Sanhedrin.
It's the Sanhedrin, yeah. We know nobody can do what you do except he be from God. We know that. Now, studies have been done in the Jewish Talmud and the other Jewish literature, and recently, and people have been looking for, and they admit that Jesus was the Messiah. The Sanhedrin does. And by the 3rd and 4th century after this time, the Jewish literature says Jesus came, the Messiah came, and we killed him. They fully admit it. But they don't talk about it. They don't teach it. They don't teach, well, the Messiah came and we killed him. Except, of course, in the book of Acts. Now, the Jews were saying to this man who was cured, it is the Sabbath. It is not permissible. By who? By the law? No. Why isn't it permissible? Because they don't want it. They want the authority of making judgment on what is permissible and what is not permissible. So what they mean by permissible is we don't allow it. Because they know there's nothing about it in the Torah. Okay? And even in the Torah it says you can rescue an animal from, if it's fallen in a ditch or anything, the Torah says rescue the animal. Why can't you rescue a man, a human? Because they don't want to allow it. They want to be in charge. If you want a deeper analysis of this, read Life at the Bottom, okay? That's as far as I'm going with that. And I do have a couple extra if you want. But the man and then they ask him, he who made me well was the one who said, pick up your pallet and walk. They ask him, who is the man? Who said to you to pick up your pallet? Who is the man? And that's the key question in the book of John. Who is the man? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Word became flesh, and he tabernacled. He pitched his tent among men. That's you two girls. And he walked with us, and he taught us, and he portrayed himself. I've always thought, I always love apologetics, and I always think through this. To me, it's a very logical statement that if we're sinners and we're made And there has to be a cause for us to be here. And that cause must explain everything about us. In other words, it has to be personal. It can't just be powerful. It has to be also personal. If we have free will, it has to have free will. In fact, because it has free will, the cause that brought us into existence, we also have free will. And to me, even since I was a little, really young, I thought God is obligated. He's obligated to come and introduce himself. Now, I don't know why I thought that when I was young, but I have always thought that way. He's under obligation. Now we're obligated to seek him, but we're not going to find him unless he chooses to reveal himself to us, right? You're going to find God unless he chooses to do that. And I know that, and I'm certain he knows that. So he comes to us. He told Eve, I will come. I will solve this by a son. And the book of Hebrews even says that. In times past, he's spoken to us through prophets and different ways in dreams and angels. In this day, he speaks through a son. I did say the son because it's the type of communication. The son is the modifier of how he speaks. So he's speaking to us through the type, not dreams, not prophecies, but through a son. And to me, he's always been obligated to do that. So the question is, who's the son? Who is it? Now, they knew that Jesus was the Messiah, but they rejected him for a variety of reasons. But the man who healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had slipped away while there was a crowd in that place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple. Notice he has no faith at this point. There's no calling to him. There's no question of his faith. But now there is. Jesus found him after he healed him. And that's important for you to understand that. Signs and wonders, I was told when I was in the Pentecostal, always have to do with faith. No, they don't. I found dozens of reasons why Jesus healed. And I found a lot of times there's no reason at all. In this case, he's healing because he wants to show the Pharisees that he is Lord of the Sabbath. Okay? And he gets to that eventually, but right here he's not. Now he turns his attention personally to this man that he's already healed. The man, he did not know who it was, for Jesus had slipped away. And afterwards Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "Behold, you have become well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you." What could be worse than laying 38 years on a stone place waiting for somebody to throw you in the pool? 30? Huh? Yeah. You know, Jesus speaks about hell more than any other person in the Bible. We don't focus on that because that's not a favorite topic. I understand that. But I think that's where he's headed with this. He said, something worse happened to you. The man, now notice this, the man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Why did he do that? Now, there's a couple places where Jesus says, go to the temple and show yourself and make offering. No, he doesn't get it. This man was well, and he doesn't appreciate it. He's given healing, but he also loses his place at the pool. He loses the social network that the pool has with it. He has to do something. Right now, he's already gotten in trouble, and he didn't like that at all. And so to try to amend his, with the Pharisees, he goes and tells them, well, it was Jesus. You know, the guy from Nazareth. And notice there, the man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. For this reason, the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing things on the Sabbath. And his answer is, you know, Sabbath is to rest from labor. And this is his answer: my Father is working until now, and I myself am working. Did that help his relationship with the Pharisees? One day, I have this guy from Wendell. He's an old man. He's older than me. And he's been coming to my house and talking to me. He's a Jehovah's Witness. And he's the leader of the Wendell Pack, okay? And there were two leaders there, a Spanish man and a white man. And we got so entangled, not entangled, we got involved with them enough to where we knew both families, and we knew the daughters and sons of the families, and we knew that they'd swapped back and forth a couple of times. And I got to know a Hispanic PhD down at the fish hatchery who was interested in the Spanish girl of the Spanish leader, and it was just all interesting how I ended up. Diane was friends with the white girl, and I was friends with this Hispanic doctor that was involved with the Spanish girl, and the whole thing was a mess. But years ago, and I remember him coming to the house one day, and it's when I lived right next door. He came in and asked, "How you doing, Pastor Randy?" and everything, and we got to talking about who is Jesus. And he said, "Well, you really can't trust the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John is just not, people can't interpret it right." And I said, "So it's really bad for people?" He says, "Most of the time it's bad for the people." And so I ripped the whole book out of John, and I said, "Here, you can burn it." And that story went through the whole Jehovah's Witness community. Everybody knows I'm the pastor who rips apart the Bible. And so it's a very interesting story. Here's the man. You know, who is this man anyway? Who is this Jesus? He's the Son of God. He says right here, "My Father works, and so do I." He's saying, I'm Lord of the Sabbath. I'm over the Sabbath. And they were persecuting. And he continues, he said, "For this reason now, therefore, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him." Now, he can heal on the Sabbath, and they can plan to murder on the Sabbath. Does that sound right? Does that sound right? Because he not only was breaking the Sabbath, but was also calling God his own Father, making himself Isa to Theou. Isa to Theou. Equal. He is the Father. So, in fact, that same word is used by Paul in Philippians 2. You know the Philippians 2 passage. Who being Isa with God, did not regard his equality with God to be something kept for himself, but he emptied himself of it. Now, we were talking about that before. Jesus answered and was saying to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, the Son of God can do nothing of himself unless it's something he sees the Father doing. For the Father, whatever the Father does, these things the Son also does in like manner. For the Father loves the Son and shows himself all things. For just as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so does the Son, and gives life to whom he wishes. For not even the Father judges anyone, but he himself has given judgment to the Son, so that all will honor the Son even as they honor the Father. He who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life and does not come into judgment, but passes out of death into life." Now, I didn't get to the big question, the signs and wonders, but you can see where I'm going with that, which I will develop in full, because there's some long passages to quote from Matthew and that. But you can see there's all kinds of reasons why God does what he does, why the Father does things. And we don't have to always understand that. And sometimes it has to do with faith and sometimes it does not. In this case, he's demonstrating to the Pharisees that he's Lord of the Sabbath. But he also gives the guy an opportunity to respond in faith, doesn't he? He goes back to the guy. He finds him. And he says, don't sin anymore, so that you fall into a deeper thing. And what does the guy do? He goes and turns him into the Pharisees. So he didn't respond well. And he doesn't respond in faith, even though he was miraculously healed. So I want you to keep that in mind, and we'll pick this up next week.